Here with us in the Milan studio is the group leader of the Five-Star Movement in the Senate, Stefano Patuanelli. Good evening, thank you for the invitation. Remember, he was already Minister of Economic Development twice with Conte and Minister of Agriculture with Draghi. Tonelli. In the meantime, cement stocks, those companies that deal with everything that has to do with construction in Piazzafari, are all on the rise, at least they were the last time I looked. Then later my colleagues from Il Sole 24 with whom we will connect, will eventually correct me. However, we can say that the markets seem convinced that peace can be lasting and that therefore the reconstruction of Gaza can begin in a reasonable time frame. This is an optimism that can be shared. In the meantime, I am, how can I say it, happy that from today there are no more snipers and no more soldiers. Our talking about the economy in a situation in which so many lives are at stake is not lighthearted. Our news always deals with it, but no, I mean it's obvious that it's like this. However, today I can be happy just for this, for the fact that after 70,000 confirmed deaths, but who knows how many. Yes, it was just a record. I mean I wasn't looking at possible deals, but the fact that if the markets bet on this, maybe they'll believe it and then maybe peace will come, regardless of deals. Of course, the stock market data, no, it's an analysis not of deals, but of stability, of trust, and therefore peace, regardless of deals, can be an element that stabilizes the markets, so it's normal that the stock markets react like this. Peace is good for the economy. I'm a bit more worried about Gaza's near future, because that area, after all, has shown us many times possible agreements, possible peace that then quickly foundered. So, before saying, there, we finally solved the Middle East problem, well, I'm a bit more cautious, but I think we all are. It's not that it's not an issue, I think we're all aware that there, in that territory, peace is very difficult, always, and even today it's difficult. The end of the Israeli invasion in Gaza City, in the Gaza Strip, should be celebrated. I'm concerned about Gaza's plan, this slightly Western idea, and this is the part of Trump's plan that perplexes us the most because objectively, if peace will ever be possible, it will be when two peoples manage it. It seems a bit like exporting democracy that the professor mentioned earlier. Exactly. Rereading that book today, anyone reading it today wouldn't believe that it was written 20 years ago, because it's happening today. Which usually indicates a great book. Well, yes, I have to say yes. Well, I can say that the limit, no, of what globalization has shown, the primacy of the market in the economy, is that it has not been a closed system, it is a system that is open to other systems that have different rules. Sure. And this is why it has been the real limit of the market and globalization, because China is not part of these we have played. I cannot impose taxes on Germany. Of course. But the United States can impose taxes on Italy, and with these rules it is a bit more difficult than globalization and this type of system. Professor, then Patuanelli, the question I have for you is whether this hypothesis, let's say, if you are convinced by the government's recipe to make pay packets a bit heavier and if it is enough, in your opinion, to recover what inflation has eaten up. Enough? Absolutely not, we are not convinced. Then we will comment on the measures and we will see them when they are written into the budget law. Sure. But you see, I believe that there is a piece of data that shows how much the next budget law will affect the economic state of this country. I think for the first time since I can remember, the programmatic data and the growth trend data coincide, that is, with current legislation in 2007, with the budget law, also in 2007, so it means. No, I say it on this broadcast where I imagine that some of the public may not know it. It means that the government's policies, as far as the programmatic document is concerned, they do not think they can affect GDP. It could also be that they are particularly, let's say, cautious. To tell the truth, despite the fact that every time Minister Giorgetta comes to a hearing at the various stages, of the budget moments of a year which are not only the budget laws, but there was the so-called NADEF, and then with the new names of the new European governance, Every time he comes, he says, I will give you very cautious data, then things will certainly improve. The next time he comes and says, it went worse than my caution, didn't it? And this has already happened. We had a forecast of, I believe, 1 for 2025 and it will close at 0.7, so 0.5, so less than half. In terms of growth, we are back at the bottom of the class in Europe. Now that's the real issue, which is the real issue because I understand, look, it's easy to create political controversy, I'm not the type to make slogans. The real issue is how to impact the growth of this country, because it's completely obvious after 3 years of a minister who has disregarded every proposal of the electoral campaign, because the League doesn't seem to me to be one of those political forces that promised austerity and cuts and reductions in public spending. But despite all this, even though he is from the same party, you can't say that Giorgetti hasn't tried to keep the accounts in order. Yes. Almost a technical minister said that for someone from the League it might seem almost vulgar, but in truth it is an act of esteem, and yet the trajectory of the debt compared to GDP is a trajectory that continues to grow, In the years of great public spending they told us that we had ruined the state accounts, but in 2000 I don't have to explain to you what inertia is in the economy, I mean for sure, but we have, let's say, reduced it by 20 points from 154 to 134. So, I say the problem polemically, I say it polemically, I will also say controversial things, but I don't say it polemically, okay? Evidently, we still can't understand, in a condition of the country in which people tend to save and not spend, in which there is a very fragile internal market, in which purchasing power is being lost, how to affect growth, because, even if we return to the primary surplus, the public debt, the ratio to GDP, continues. Let me go back to Undersecretary Albano. Now, here too the data speaks for itself, right? There have been 31 months of decline in industrial production over 34 months of government. This is a fact. There is no industrial project that has come out of the ministry that should do this. But it is not true that an industrial plan has never been drawn up for the country, because I would like us to explain what an industrial plan for the country is. For me, 4.0 is an industrial plan for the country. Some incentives for companies to invest in new technologies represent an industrial guideline for the country. And now I don't know what they told Undersecretary Albano. Even Minister Giorgetti. Transition 4.0 did not benefit from the temporary framework and the suspension of state aid schemes because it was notified in 2019 when there was no extraordinary regime. So saying that today we can no longer implement 4.0 because the temporary framework created by COVID no longer exists is simply not true, it is simply false. Can we say that? I cannot. Say that it cannot be done because those rules cannot be applied with European funds. We did not do it with European funds. I said no, but now they are doing it with European funds. This cannot be done, we can say. The 5.0 that was implemented with NRRP funds falls within the constraints and limits of the NRRP, not because it is not an aid scheme, because it was clearly notified, because it could have been a measure that in some way constituted state aid. At that stage, the Commission said it could be done because it is a horizontal and not a vertical measure. So even a German company that is based in Italy and wants to implement 4.0 can do so, and therefore it is not an aid scheme, so it can be done again with state resources and not with the NRRP. Well, when Giorgetti comes to the hearing he says, we would like to do transition 4.0, but Europe won't let us do it anymore. No, you would like to do it with the money you are throwing away on 5.0, given that 330 million euros have been committed out of a 6.5 billion measure. So you are throwing away 6 billion, 200 million, you don't want to throw them away, you want to move them to 4.0. This can't be done, it's true. Very good, but I am saying that we need a 3-year plan for 4.0 with tax credits, as had been set up since 2019. Regarding tax rates, in my opinion, we need to return to the rates that we had planned, but they can also be reduced as tax credits to have, let's say, a lower economic impact, given that that plan has, more or less, been around 29 billion in total over the 4 years, but we are not saying that it can't be done, it is a choice not to do it. After that, I repeat, there's not only the issue of 4.0. That is, the Ministry of Made in Italy companies, is a ministry that does not exist. It does not exist. I do not remember a measure taken by that ministry. But today we have the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Economy and Finance with us as guests, right? And I know, but if we were talking about the industrial plan, the question was asked and I would say I will put myself in that usual place. I know very well that it is not the responsibility of Giorgetta or even less of the Undersecretary D'Albano, but holy patience after 3 years of the third longest lasting government in the history of the Republic, not the fourth. Among other things, there's the narrative that everything that is happening in this country today is the fault of the left that has governed for 20 years. The 3 longest lasting governments in the history of the Republic are Berlusconi II, Berlusconi IV and Meoni, which do not seem to me to have been all center-left governments. Okay, just to give those who are responsible for the state of this country some responsibility, but I really believe that the disappointment will end, Lucia, just for a second. In my opinion, the biggest disappointment of this government is how it has destroyed the relationship between the country and businesses. Thanks to Stefano Patuanelli, Loretta Napoleon, and all of you who followed us online today on the news. See you on Monday.